Hi, and welcome to this video. We'll go through how you can get started with SAP CPI and create your first iFlow that calls a web service and see what's going on in this process. So the first thing you need to do is you need to go and create a new cloud instance. I have written a blog post about it. There's a link to it in the comments here. I guess it's this one. In basic, you go to HANA trial. You enter your trial account, enter the trial, and it will take a little while. You go to subscriptions, and then there is one that's called process integration. You then subscribe to this, go to the application, and it'll then guide you to the process. Once you've done that, you can say provision here. And once you have done that, you can go and add the user roles to your accounts. Then once you've done that, you can open the CPI instance, and then you are good to go. I have seen it has taken a few instances. So first time I could create packages and deploy and create an iFlow but not open it. Once I was able to do that, I could deploy it, and it says the first time it may take a little while to deploy. So if it doesn't work first time, no worries. So first thing is you need to create a package for this. So we'll call it CPI course, and you need to transcription version 0.1, and it's the vendor is you. We save this, and now we have created our first package where we can put in content, and we will create an iFlow here. So we'll select add integration flow and my first CPI flow. It's CPI. You can put in whatever you want here. It's good. So in the cloud platform trial, one of the challenges that I often see it is that at the moment you do not really support the HTTP properties. So normally if you're on a Neo environment, what you can do is you can create an HTTP, then enter an endpoint, deploy it and run it, and once you've done that, you can call this web service and trigger the processing. On the Cloud Foundry at the moment, it's a little more difficult because you need to call with a certificate and set it up. So for the way I prefer to do it in a CPI and a Cloud Foundry environment is delete this process. Then I will create a time event, and the time event then can be scheduled to run at a specific point in time. So this is really useful if you want to every hour, every day process a query, fetch some data and deliver it. For us, we're pretty good with this, so this is all we need. And then we'll just have a small content modifier just to see we have set some data. And we can then, in the content modifier, we can change the body and the payload. And that's a good idea if you have a starting timer and are using any kind of processing to use this. So we'll write here. You then have the option to save as a version. It's probably a good idea to have a version just so we know we have saved this. And when we press deploy, it will then start deploying our iFlow. And it will say here deploying, and normal way to go around this is say duplicate. Then it will duplicate the full process, and once you've done that, you can then select the monitor tab, and in here we can then hopefully see we got an iFlow that's called my first CPI iFlow that's starting. A good thing is to switch it into debug, because in debug you will get a debug log about, you can see what's going on. And once you've done that, if you want to see what's really being processed, let's switch it to trace. The trace is only valid for like 10 minutes, but once it's running and starting, we can see a lot more content going on in it. So now it is just about waiting until we get a message in here. This can take a little while depending on the the scope and the processing of these things. So let's see here. So I think here it's just saying started still. Yeah, it's still starting. So let me just pause the video until we started and let's see. Okay, so I changed the other iFlow at started. So for now it seems like it can take up to 30 minutes to start an iFlow, which is really frustrating that you cannot get started as quickly as you want to, but I guess that's one of the limitations of this Cloud Foundry trial. I would hope they would improve it, but that's the current status is. So we can see this one is starting, and it says here up to 30 minutes for it to start. So I've just changed this CPI course demo I have, and it has then been deployed, and we can see it has run 2 times. Here we have the run. We can see it has trace enabled, so it's the same process that as we had in the other iFlow as we created. And once we have opened this in trace mode, this will take a little while for it to process and get the content, and so it will show what you have of data. You can go in here to the content, and with this we can see what messages is being processed and the payload. So this is the payload before the step, and here we have after the step. So we can see it has now added the demo into the payload, which is what we wanted in this this first approach. Next up is we want to modify this a little more and create some more content into it. So we can, for instance, create a header. A header, so a normal CPI message contains of header properties, headers, properties, and body. In the header, this is everything that's needed to send the data outside of it. In the exchange, you got the data that you need to keep internally, and then you got the body, which is the payload that's currently active. So if we can set up demo header 1, demo header, and a value 1 to 3, we can put in a property that is called prop demo 3.5, and in here, for instance, we can put in different variables or just enhance our value here. So if we wanted to, we could take some of the data we have gotten from our header. So we can say here, so this is a camel expression, header, demo, and then our idea is that it should extract this data and put it into here. So let's try deploy this version. So I'll deploy it, save, and it does look like it is processing a little slower than than on my normal environment. It was pretty good to do this. So let's check the payload at this state after our processing. So we can see here it has now, we got our header, demo header, we got our demo properties here, and we can see we have modified this with a groovy expression. Okay, so far so good. Now we have we're able to deploy the tooling and see how it goes. One thing we want to do before we get started and code too much is there is this list of tools. There's a link in the blog accompanying this. There is the Convista CPI Helper. If you open this from the Chrome store, one of the things you can add here is you can add this to the Chrome, and what this will give you is in here you can see messages. So it'll give you these boxes. You can see info about okay, some of it does not work on the Cloud Foundry, so you can see set it to trace. You can click on a link here, and then you actually have this pop up where we can see all the data before the step. And if we click at the last one here, we can also see the body. We can see all the things. So we don't need to go into the trace to view what's happening here. So this is all good. So next here is we want to call a mock service or call a service externally. So my current preferred service to call is Mockable IO, and this is really simple. So you just say try for free. The idea is we want to create something we can call, and once we have called it, we will be able to process it simple or see what we're receiving. We don't want to set up 15 layers of OAuth or the kind of complex token. So we want to define a new REST endpoint, and we will just call it demo. We can specify if we want to put it as a post or get we want to have here. Let's put it as a post. And then we can specify what we want to send back. So let's just like that, I think we will need to do. So then you need to save it. You need to mock services stop, so we need to start it, and we enabled the request. We can also set a delay off if we want to, but I guess that's not really a purpose. Then we can call these services, and I'm not sure if we can call it with HTTPS, but let's try. So now we have an endpoint we can call with some data, and once we have called it, we will be able to see we have actually called the service with our content. So that's all good. We go back to our iFlow. We will then create a call out to our mock service. So we will say here, mock service. Can't remember if we need to just no spaces into. We have external calls here. We can create a request reply. So let's do that here. We'll just move this a little at the endpoint. We can say here call service. It needs to be HTTP. Then in here we will then specify what our endpoint is. And the best way to do that is to call it, to create an external parameter for it. Like this. Then we can add whatever we want into this. And once we have done that, it's actually possible to configure these things to different value, which is really necessary once you want to transport it. We set it as post. We just do not have any authentication. We can put in a query parameter if we want to. I don't think it will matter anything because we're anyway not really using it. And that's all we actually need for us to be able to call the service and get a response from it. The only thing that may miss is they are not using a certificate that's been that's a part of the Cloud Foundry certificate store. Well, let's see. So now we've configured it. We send deploy. So let's see if we can deploy it. And if everything works out, we should receive a new message here. We receive some error, so it says SSL certificate is not valid, and we could add the new certificate to the certificate store. We don't want to do that at this point in time. So as I said, we just have it configurable now. That means we can go into our configure mode. We can remove the HTTP, save, and deploy. Do you want to deploy it? Yep. And this is really the cool thing about this Convista CPI Helper. You don't need to go into all these other jobs to see what's going on. So it seems like there's still some problems, but let's see if it is able to help and process these things. No message found. So let's see what it is, what's being processed. If we have processed any messages. So we still have, it has not started yet again. So let's just try to deploy it and see if it works. So now we can see we have processed a message. We can give a call here. We can see what the payload is on this, and we can see we got our response code back. So that was pretty cool. If we go to our console in Mockable, you can, where is it? Here, request inspector. We can see what information we have. We can see our request inspector, so we can see here demo, no traces found. So maybe we forgot to enable tracing. Oh, we forgot the locking. So if we deploy it again, request inspector, still no traces found. So the idea is we just want to trigger every time we have made a change, and that's really actually the cool thing about having something that starts based on the timer, because every time you deploy it, you'll actually see what the result is. Deploy. Maybe it's not possible to deploy it multiple times with this content. So now we just want to edit it again. And we can go back into our edit mode. Actually, let's afterward this. So since we're getting supposedly some JSON back into our content, we can use the converter. So we can add a JSON to XML converter. Let's see how that goes if I've created valid JSON in it. So this should be good. So after this, we should hopefully get some JSON. So let's save a version. Just make sure that it is still not pointing to the HTTPS point. So deploy it. So now we can see it's been called. If we go to Unmockable, refresh here, we can see the payloads that have been sent. We can see it's coming, some of this is coming from their side, App Engine. We can see we're getting the SAP ID, we're getting this demo header we added, but we are not getting our demo properties, and that's because the demo is a part of, or the header is a part of the HTTP request that's being sent. It also sends the SAP password and correlation ID. And then we can see that there is a payload in it. And we can see what response coming back. And if we go back to our CPI flow, we will also see the same thing. If we look at our traces, we can see at our endpoint here, the last spot, we can see we are getting a root XML that we can actually see what's coming into this. So the last thing I just want to do is I want to take this error code and check what value it is. So we can go here, so edit again. So if we select a content modifier, so it is not possible to extract at the moment content from JSON, but if you, for instance, have, so this is our response code, you can select it as being extracted from an XPath, and then here you will need to write what data type we're expecting, and then here you can just specify its response code. We can obviously go through and find the full XPath, I guess, which would be root. So let's just do that. And now, after we have run this, we should be able to see get error code. Oh, just get response code. So one of the key thing is always do like an iterative development of these things. So we can then hopefully see we got new message here. We can see the payload we're getting here. So if we look at the header, we should be able to see our error code, or was it a property? It should be a header. It was because we selected the wrong one. And I guess that's also why this one was not lit. Maybe we're outside of trace. So we can see here it's just debug and not trace. Maybe that will give us some problems. So let's see if it will deploy now. And we'll get a new one. So now we can see we've got a new response. So let's see. And in our header we can now see the response code. So we can now, based on this content, we can then do one or two things. So we have the option here to create a router, which will then take our message and do either call this endpoint, or we can make it call a different endpoint. And just a small content modifier. I really like the content modifier. It's something you can add without doing anything. And in a content modifier, you can obviously specify some specific properties that it needs to set. And I do find it a good idea sometimes to just set these to get some debug values, and then obviously you need to clean it up afterwards. In our router now, we can then specify what we want to do, and if we want to have some exception handling or whatever. So we can say if we want to go on route 1, it is if we need to specify one as the default route and the other one processing. So we can either do it with XML, so we can actually just do it specified if router equals to this, so we can use our XPath to qualify it, or we can use our null XML, and if we do this, it's normally just showing how we can do this. So we can see here, if we have this property, we can say if header equals this, then do this. So we can go like this. Header.response code equal 444. Then we will go do this way. Otherwise, we will go the other way. So let's try that. So we will save as a version. You don't need to save all things as a version, but it's a good idea because afterwards you can always come back to the specific version you have and see if there's anything going on with it. It's also a good thing when you have this that you can always just switch on trace mode. So let's see if it went up there, which was as expected. If we go back here to a mockable service and go into our debug here, so if we change this value, save it, hopefully once we deploy this again, we should then be able to see that the new process has been called. So with this, we're able to pretty simple set up a way to extract data from call a web service, process the data, convert it to XML, extract some content, figure out what way we want to process this, and send it to a specific service. If you want to know more about how to develop an SAP CPI, I have a really good course on cpicourse.com. I really recommend this. So if you just click up here, you can read more about this, but this is all the content you need for you to know these advanced features, knowing how to get started, how do we handle data stores and stuff like that. So I really recommend you going through this and figure out how you can develop a CPI in much more details. I hope this has been helpful. If you liked it, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and write any comments if you liked it. So thanks for watching.